Hi there, my name is Matti Sulanto. I'm a photographer and a Lumix ambassador based in Helsinki, Finland. In this video, I'm gonna take a look at the differences between a zoom lens and a prime lens. And if you're looking to buy a lens, but you can't quite decide which lens type to get, a zoom or a prime, this could be really helpful. But before I go any further, please consider subscribing to my channel and tap the bell down there so you won't miss any of my future videos. I'll post a new video on Tuesdays and on Fridays. Alright, so we are gonna talk about the differences between a zoom lens and a prime lens. And the first and the most fundamental difference is, of course, that the zoom lens can zoom. You can change the focal length or your framing just by turning the zoom ring. You don't have to change lenses, or you don't have to move closer to your subject or further away from your subject to get your desired framing. Just by turning the ring does it. As with a prime lens, you're stuck with only this one focal length. This one, for example, is 25 millimeters. So if you want to change your framing, you either have to get closer to your subject or further away from your subject. Sometimes it's no problem to move a little bit closer or a little bit further away. Let's say you are taking a portrait of a friend. It's not a big deal to take a step forward or step backward to get your desired framing. But let's say you are shooting wildlife from a height. Obviously, you can't move. So with a prime lens, you have pretty much one option. You get what you can get, and then you can crop in post, but that's never the best option. But if you have a telezoom lens, you can, within the zoom range, you can go wider or tighter and get the framing you want, or at least very close to the framing you want. The zoom lens that I'm using here as an example is the Panasonic Leica 12 to 60 millimeters, which is also sold as a kit with many Panasonic camera bodies, for example with this Lumix G9. And this covers all the focal lengths from 12 to 60 millimeters. And you would need at least 3 prime lenses to cover the same or similar focal length range adequately. You would need a 12 millimeter and maybe 25 millimeter and then a 60 millimeter lenses. And even then you would have gaps in the range. With the zoom you have all the focal lengths between 12 and 60 millimeters. But if you want less gaps in the range, you would probably also want to have 15 millimeter and maybe 42.5 millimeter lenses. That's already 5 lenses. It sounds almost too good to be true. One lens can replace 3, 4 or 5 prime lenses. So what are the downsides? Okay, let's first talk about the size and the weight. A zoom lens is always bigger than one prime lens. Look at the difference. This is 42.5 millimeter and this is the 12 to 60 millimeter zoom lens. Look how much smaller the prime lens is. But then, of course, if you combine something like 3 prime lenses and one zoom lens, then the zoom lens is probably smaller and lighter than 3 prime lenses. And with the prime lenses, you always have the option to take just one prime with you if you know that you're only gonna need one focal length. For example, a 15 millimeter. You can only take that and then your camera lens combination will be a lot smaller and lighter than with this zoom lens. Because with the zoom lens, you're stuck with what you have. You can't separate just one focal length from here. There's no way of doing that. Okay, but what about the image quality then? Many modern zoom lenses are really good optically, but I think it's still safe to say that most of the time the prime lenses have a small edge here still. But However, in real life photography and just by looking at some pictures, I think it would be impossible or very difficult to tell if that particular picture was shot using a zoom lens or a prime lens. However, it's good to acknowledge that some zooms that cover very extreme range, say from 12 to 200 millimeters or something similar, are probably not that constant optically across the whole range. They probably lose some of that sharpness and contrast towards the long end of the range. But of course, sharpness and contrast are not everything in a picture, right? Many people are after that soft, beautiful, nice out of focus area, also called a bokeh. And there usually a prime lens does a better job than a zoom lens. Because of two reasons. First of all, the optical design of a prime lens is much less of a compromise than the optical design of a zoom lens, because a prime lens only needs to cover that one focal length, and therefore the optical design can be better optimized for that, only that one particular focal length. And the other thing is that usually prime lenses have much faster maximum aperture, and that helps a lot when you want to have that nice soft out of focus area called bokeh. And you can separate your subject much better from the background if you can open up the aperture a little bit more. Typically, a prime lens would have 1 or 2 stops faster maximum aperture compared to a zoom lens at the same focal length. And that's a big difference. I'm not gonna talk about the distortions, chromatic aberrations, and some other optical flaws that are more or less not relevant in the Micro Four Thirds because they are corrected in camera. And then there is the price, of course. It's the money that counts, right? Okay, usually a zoom lens is more expensive than one prime lens. But if you buy 2, 3, 4 or even 5 prime lenses, they're gonna cost a lot more than one zoom lens that covers approximately the same range. And with prime lenses you have the option of only buying one at a time, so you don't need that much cash at the start. So I would say the main benefit of a zoom lens is the convenience and practicality in some situations. You never have to change lenses as long as you stay within the zoom range. And maybe if you are a beginner or not that experienced and you haven't quite found your genre in photography or your style, maybe a zoom lens is a wise choice. It's easier to experiment with that. And the main benefits of a prime lens would be, of course, the compact, the size, lightweight, and usually faster maximum aperture. I really like to use primes rather than a standard zoom lens because the primes are so compact and they have relatively fast maximum aperture. But when I need a longer telephoto or an ultra wide angle, then I usually prefer a zoom lens, because when I need that kinds of lenses, it's usually a paid assignment, and I find that a zoom lens offers me better flexibility to make what my client wants in that situation. And when I'm using my personal photography, I usually only use one prime lens because it clarifies, for me, it clarifies the process of observing and seeing my surroundings. I'm only looking for pictures suitable for this one prime lens. It just works for me really well. I'm not saying it's the only way or it's the best way to do photography. I recommend you try it sometimes, but it just works for me really well. I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.